Okay, let's dig into something that, well, it feels utterly overwhelming lately, doesn't it?
Hmm.
If you've glanced at the headlines or maybe checked your inbox for yet another breach notification or really just exist online, there's this constant flood of information about data security incidents.
Yeah, it's like a fire hose, really. Trying to keep up, trying to make sense of it all. It's tough.
It really is. How do you even begin to understand what's actually happening?
It is a challenge for sure. The sheer volume of reports, data exposures, breaches, compromised records, it's just staggering and
Right.
creates all this noise, makes it difficult to really grasp the landscape, what's actually going on with our personal data and the organizations we trust with it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We've gathered a whole lot of material that gives us a look into this world, from specific recent incidents right up to the big picture trends. Our mission here is to try and cut through some of that noise, pull out the most important insights we can find, and hopefully help you get a clearer view of the situation.
And before we really jump in, just a quick word about our sponsor, Stonefly.
Ah, yes.
They're leaders in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. So if you're thinking about how to better secure your organization's data, especially with threats like ransomware out there.
Which is always top in mind.
Exactly. Stonefly offers secure, ransomware-proof storage solutions, things like air-gapped and immutable storage. Really important stuff.
Definitely. And how can people find out more?
Easy. To learn more or schedule a demo, you can just contact them at sales@stonefly.com.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with a recent event that popped up in the material. We looked at something involving LexisNexis Risk Solutions.
Right.
Now, for anyone maybe not familiar, this company, they're based in Atlanta, Georgia, and they play this massive role in, well, gathering data.
Huge role. They collect vast amounts of information, often from public records, other kinds of sources too, and then they provide that data to sectors like finance, insurance, healthcare, government.
To help them do what exactly?
To help them assess risk, identify potential fraud. They're basically a major hub for personal data, a huge hub.
Handling incredibly sensitive information then on a massive scale.
Exactly. And a recent report we saw highlighted a specific incident. It said 364,000 people were impacted by a data exposure that involved GitHub data related to LexisNexis Risk Solutions.
Okay, so 364,000 individuals, and it's linked to their GitHub presence. That immediately makes you think, doesn't it, about the security challenges even for a company whose whole business is data, even when it's maybe not their core customer database directly.
It really underscores the complexity, yeah.
Huh.
And interestingly, the material also gave a bit of insight into how an organization like this presents its data management practices publicly. Well, it notes they make privacy policies and processing notices available. You know, those documents that are supposed to explain how they handle and use your data?
The fine print.
Pretty much. And there's even contact information provided for legal inquiries if you think your data might have been compromised, listing specific offices, phone numbers.
And I think it mentioned details about cookies too, right? On their website.
Yeah, categorizing them essential, Google Analytics, external services, and offering ways for you to manage your preferences.
It's this kind of duality, isn't it? On one hand, you see these documented efforts towards transparency, process control,
Uh-huh.
and right alongside that, you have a significant data exposure event being reported.
It is. It really shows that, having policies, having contact points, that's one piece of the puzzle. But actually preventing these exposures,
Yeah.
that's a whole different and clearly an ongoing challenge for everyone.
So that LexisNexis incident, it's a specific example.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest takeaways, really, from looking across all this information is just how immense, how pervasive the broader problem of data breaches actually is. It's definitely not just one company.
Oh, absolutely not. It's a landscape just dotted with countless incidents. The scale is frankly mind-boggling when you start to look at the numbers.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, we see reports that jump from affecting, hundreds of thousands, like the LexisNexis one, right up to figures in the billions, billions with a B.
Wow.
Take the reported National Public Beta incident from August 2024. It was described as potentially one of the largest data security breaches ever, possibly exposing personal info of nearly 3 billion people.
Nearly 3 billion. That number is almost impossible to really wrap your head around.
It really is. And it's not like a total outlier among the biggest ones mentioned either. There was the Shanghai National Police Database, over 1 billion records reportedly exposed there, apparently due to an unsecured database.
Just left open.
Seems like it. Then the Indian Council of Medical Research, over 815 million records reportedly hacked. And Exactus, another one of those data brokers, 340 million records exposed due to what was described as, well, poor security.
So these massive ones, they obviously grab headlines because the numbers are just astronomical.
Right. But what's maybe equally striking when you look across all the information is the sheer variety of organizations affected. It becomes so clear that no sector is safe. None at all.
Yeah, it's not just, the big tech companies or banks you might immediately
Yeah.
think of. We saw examples right across government and public services.
Police forces mentioned Netherlands, South Africa, Transport for London, major health organizations like the Indian ICMR we just mentioned, the UK's NHS, Singapore's MOH, tax authorities.
Tax agencies, wow.
Yeah, Bulgaria, Norway, South Carolina,
Yeah.
immigration departments, Australia, Indonesia, even military and veterans affairs departments in the U.S. have shown up on these lists over the years.
And education too, right? Universities seem to be hit quite often.
Definitely. Australian National University, Western Sydney Uni were mentioned. Big U.S. names too, Maryland, Ohio State, Stanford, Yale. The list goes on.
And then, of course, the companies. The list there is just vast.
Yeah.
Spans pretty much every industry you can imagine.
Absolutely. Healthcare providers, Anthem, HCA Healthcare, Medibank in Australia. Financial giants, Equifax, Capital One, JP Morgan Chase, MasterCard, and Visa, indirectly through processors.
Social media.
Oh, yeah. All the big ones. Facebook's had multiple incidents mentioned. MySpace back in the day, Tumblr, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Google+, Taringa.
Retailers we shop at every day.
Yep. Target, Home Depot, Michaels, TJ Maxx, Staples, Neiman Marcus. Even issues traced back through payment processors affecting places like Macy's.
Tech companies themselves.
Of course. Adobe, Microsoft, Sony famously, multiple times, Dropbox, Evernote, LastPass, Salesforce, and even cloud infrastructure providers like Snowflake recently.
And gaming.
Big time. PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Nintendo, Epic Games, Roblox, Insomniac Games.
And back to the data brokers again, like ChoicePoint, Exactus, and National Public Data One.
Exactly. And that Snowflake incident you mentioned from 2024 adds another layer, doesn't it?
How so?
Because it wasn't just Snowflake. It reportedly impacted numerous other companies that rely on their service. Big names like AT&T and Ticketmaster were mentioned. It really highlights that interconnectedness, the whole supply chain risk thing.
Right. Vulnerability in one place can just ripple outwards.
Precisely. It affects many downstream organizations.
Okay, so we're getting a picture of the scale, the breadth. It's huge, it's everywhere. But the really crucial question, I think, is how? How is all this data actually getting exposed? What are the methods, the weaknesses these incidents reveal?
Yeah, that's key. And looking at the descriptions provided in the material, it's quite a diverse picture. Hacking is the word people often use as a catch-all, right?
Right.
And traditional hacking, malicious actors breaking in, gaining unauthorized access, it's definitely prominent. It was cited in huge incidents like Sony, Equifax, Capital One, lots of the government breaches mentioned.
But it's not always some super complex Mission Impossible style intrusion, is it?
No, not at all. A really significant factor highlighted again and again is actually, poor security or misconfiguration. Just basic stuff sometimes.
Like what kind of stuff?
We saw numerous examples pointing to this. Capital One's breach was famously linked to a misconfigured S3 bucket that's a type of cloud storage container. Other examples mentioned exposed data at Microsoft, MongoDB, even the U.S. Postal Service, all apparently linked to servers or databases that just weren't properly secured or set up correctly, left open, essentially.
That really clicks with something we saw mentioned, didn't we? A point made somewhere that while everyone focuses on, complex software flaws, CVEs they call them,
Right, common vulnerabilities and exposures.
that maybe simple misconfigurations are actually causing way more widespread damage in practice, just leaving the digital doors unlocked, kind of.
It certainly seems that way based on the frequency it's mentioned. It's a critical insight, I think. Sometimes it's not about some unknown zero-day exploit. It's just basic security hygiene failing.
Yeah. And the information also showed that, physical security still matters. Lapses there can lead straight to digital data loss.
Absolutely. Incidents caused by lost or stolen devices or physical media laptops, hard drives, USB sticks were listed for organizations all over the map. U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, TRICARE, Bank of America, Boeing, various health systems, government agencies in the UK and U.S.
Just losing a laptop can expose massive amounts of data.
Unfortunately, yes. And then there are insider threats. That's another recurring theme.
People on the inside.
Yeah, whether it's an employee acting maliciously or maybe just being careless or negligent. We saw cases mentioned like AOL back in 2004, the CIA leak in 2017, Countrywide Financial, a Canadian credit union called Desjardins. Marriott had one attributed partly to insiders, even a Tesla example where insider wrongdoing was specifically noted.
So the threat isn't always coming from outside the walls.
Definitely not. And sometimes it's just an accident, an honest mistake, but with massive repercussions. Accidental exposure or publication.
Like what? Fat fingering and email attachment?
Could be something like that, or configuring permissions wrongly. Examples mentioned included the Australian Immigration Department accidentally publishing that list of G20 leaders' details.
Ouch.
Yeah. The Australian Red Cross exposing donor data. Other incidents were government agencies or even companies like Facebook and LinkedIn unintentionally made private data publicly accessible for a time. Simple mistakes, huge impact.
Okay, what else?
Well, credential stuffing and phishing attacks were cited too.
That's where they use passwords stolen from one place to try and log into other accounts,
Right, exactly. Using compromised login details to break into accounts on totally different services. Incidents noted at places like 23andMe and Roku recently were linked to this.
And scraping?
Web scraping, yeah. Collecting data from public-facing profiles. While sometimes it's legitimate data gathering, it was listed as a method used to collect user data from sites like chess.com or Duolingo, which can definitely be seen as a data exposure depending on the specifics and the data involved.
And finally, ransomware keeps coming up too.
Right. That's where attackers encrypt an organization's data and demand payment to unlock it. That was mentioned as the cause in incidents like the one at the British Library, Kadokawa Corporation in Japan.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem in itself.
So when you really look across that whole spectrum,
Yeah.
wow, it's everything from, sophisticated state-sponsored hacking maybe down to malicious insiders, but also just shockingly simple errors, misconfigured settings, lost hardware, accidental clicks.
But it's the whole gamut, really.
Yeah. Which I guess brings us to the most important connection.
Hmm.
What does this overwhelming landscape of breaches happening in all these different ways actually mean for you, the listener? Why should you care?
Well, it means your personal data is highly, highly likely to be caught up in this ongoing challenge somewhere, probably in multiple places.
How so?
Think about it. Your information is held by the banks you use, the doctors or hospitals you visit, government agencies that have your records for taxes or licenses, the online stores you buy from, the social media platforms you use,
Right.
and almost certainly by those data brokers we mentioned, the ones like LexisNexis or Exactus, who specifically collect data about you from numerous public and private sources.
Okay.
And all that data, no matter who holds it or how they got it, is potentially vulnerable. It could be exposed through any of the methods we've just talked about.
Yeah.
Hacking, mistakes, insiders, lost devices.
And the type of data that gets exposed in these incidents, it's not trivial stuff, is it?
No, absolutely not. We saw lists detailing incredibly sensitive information. Your name, address, date of birth, social security number, basically the keys to your identity.
Financial details, too.
Oh, yeah. Credit card numbers, bank account information, medical records, often called PHI, protected health information, extremely private.
Login credentials.
Yep, usernames, passwords, email addresses, which can then be used for those credential stuffing attacks elsewhere, and sometimes even really personal stuff like private notes, documents, photos.
You just have to think about the information compromised in huge breaches like Equifax or the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM hack affecting government employees, or all those healthcare breaches.
Exactly. It's the core data that makes up your digital identity, paints a detailed picture of your life, your finances, your health.
And while these breaches are what grab the headlines, it is worth remembering, like we saw with that LexisNexis example, that many organizations do publish things like privacy policies, processing notices.
Right. They state their intentions, supposedly, for how they'll handle your data. And sometimes they offer some controls, like managing cookie preferences on a website.
It's kind of a reminder that there are stated rules and frameworks out there, even if the reality of security doesn't always live up to those statements.
Precisely. The stated policy versus the actual practice can sometimes be quite different, unfortunately.
So, reflecting on all of this information, the billions of records, the seemingly endless list of affected organizations, the sheer variety of ways things go wrong, it paints a picture of just immense scale and, well, complexity.
It truly does. This isn't a problem confined to one country or one industry. It's global, it's multifaceted, and it's been going on for decades, really.
Yeah.
And it highlights these constant ongoing challenges for anyone involved in cybersecurity. The difficulty of just detecting intrusions proactively, what they call threat hunting. That ongoing debate we touched on, should the focus be more on fixing fundamental security failures, like those misconfigurations, versus chasing the latest, newest software vulnerabilities?
Right. Where do you put your resource?
Exactly. And just the sheer volume, the overwhelming number of incidents that security professionals have to try and deal with day in, day out, it's immense.
It certainly makes that initial feeling we talked about, just being overwhelmed by the news, feel pretty understandable, doesn't it?
It does.
Hopefully this deep dive into the information helps bring some of that vastness into sharper focus, at least.
I think so. You get a clearer sense of the immense scale involved. Definitely. The incredibly diverse array of organizations being targeted, nobody's immune, and the really varied methods used to expose data. It's not just hacking in the way people might think.
Right. It's that whole mix, complex attacks, yes, but also basic human errors, misconfigurations, lost devices, insider actions.
That whole picture.
It really drives home why understanding this complicated data security landscape is just so crucial for everyone now, not just the tech pros. Whether you're trying to protect your own sensitive information or you're part of an organization that's responsible for safeguarding other people's data.
Which leads to a really interesting question to ponder, I think, based on everything we've seen here.
Yeah.
Given the sheer volume, the variety, the persistence of these data breaches, does it seem more realistic or maybe more important for organizations to focus their efforts primarily on trying to prevent every single possible attack vector? Or should the focus shift more towards minimizing the impact when, maybe not if, but when a breach inevitably occurs? Building resilience, perhaps?
Prevention versus minimizing the blast radius, essentially. Yeah. That's a really powerful question to consider as you think about this whole landscape. A tough one.
It is.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we definitely want to thank our sponsor, Stonefly, one more time.
Absolutely.
They are leaders in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. Crucial areas in today's world.
Indeed. And if you're looking for those robust ransomware-proof storage options, we mentioned things like air-gapped storage, immutable storage, which are key defenses. Stonefly is a major player to look at.
Yeah. So if you want to schedule a demo, discuss your specific needs, how can you reach them again?
Just contact them at sales@stonefly.com. That's sales@stonefly.com.